employee morale, they had good retention, they had high productivity, and they certainly had very good profit margin. Micro-inequities can actually lead to poor employee performance when a manager has low expectations. Employees have a tendency to deliver what is expected of them, and in this instance, when it's very limited, then you don't get very much. Now, a manager can say, oh, I expect all of my employees to deliver. I expect, and I have high expectations from all of my employees. But when the manager's behavior is not consistent with the expectation, I want you to think about what happens. If the manager's behavior is not consistent, you could very well end up with an organization of employees who quit, but they never leave. I'm sure many of you have worked with some colleagues who have quit and never left, and you know how that impacts productivity in an office. Bias, prejudice, racism, and the methods that they all send is just not profitable. Often at work, the approach we take is to tackle an issue in the easiest and the quickest way. But of course, the approach does not always deliver the best outcome. Because when it may be easier to get someone to work with you, you have 4 people who think exactly like you do versus 4 people who think very differently. In the end, it may not be the best solution for the organization. When people don't feel included, disengagement occurs. So how do we even deal with micro-inequities? Through micro-affirmations. And when you practice micro-affirmations, these are simple behaviors that let you know that you're doing well and that you are expected to succeed. They support, they value, and they include others. These are things that we do that allow other people to feel appreciated, understood, and respected. So how do we prevent micro-inequities? How do we actually even get our arms around this whole subject? To prevent micro-inequities, we first have to recognize the importance of a micro-inequity. And we must bring the impact of this invisible behavior to the organization. And behavior change happens when we bring it to a person's conscious level. Everyone carries blinders. And a blinder in communication is when other people experience you. You may not see the behavior that you are exhibiting, but this is how other people experience you. So being aware, having awareness of your blinders can then bring you in touch with how other people are experiencing you. Individuals can send anywhere between 40 and 150 micro messages in just a 10-minute conversation. And when these micro messages take the form of a micro inequity, they can take various forms, and some have a tendency to be less obvious than others. They can include behaviors that communicate a lower level of expectation and a performance of exclusion. We must examine our personal lens, the ones that really cloud our judgment when it comes to assessing other people, their performance, and their ability. When we talk about perception, we don't see things as they are, we see things as we are. So for example, if your organization feels that the best style of leadership is an authoritative style of leadership, then you may have a tendency to stereotype a person as being a weak individual and a weak leader if they lead with a more collaborative style of leadership. And if others in the organization think just like you do, then you really are going to end up with a very rigid style of leadership, and you're not going to be able to appreciate the differences that somebody else can bring that has a different style of leadership. So sometimes it really does take a financial threat for businesses to really take steps to eradicate a problem. When an organization recognizes the financial impact of people not being able to communicate effectively through micro-inequities or micro-messages, then people will take notice. Before there was a name for sexual harassment, you all remember that in organizations, people used to think, oh, you know, this is just how it is, this is something we have to put up with. But once it was defined, there was a definition, it was given a name, and companies really began to take notice of it. And as you continue your conversation today, I do want you to take back to your organization and to your law firms that micro-inequities training is really essential to your diversity and inclusion training, because micro-inequities training really connects the dot to all your efforts to create an inclusive organization. This is where organizations really walk the talk. And those silent saboteurs are indiscriminate, and they actually occur all over the place. They occur within cultures, they occur within gender issues, they occur within age groups. Now, the good news and the bad news is that because the behavior is so prevalent, and everyone at some point or another has been on the receiving end or the sending end of micro messages and exclusionary behavior, it's easier for people to address it once they know what it is. Organizations can bring the subject of micro-inequities and the silent saboteur to the forefront through discussion. Some discrimination is a very appropriate topic to have with your staff. Have it in your staff meetings. If you have a newsletter, include it in your newsletter. If you do employee attitude surveys, include it in the survey. Having dialogue with employees on the subject really gets people talking about ways that they exclude others and how they can be more inclusive in their behavior and in their conversations. You can just ask people, do you feel respected? Do you feel valued? Do you feel appreciated here? And what can a manager do? Senior management can ask, what can we do differently? Is our workforce feeling valued? Do you feel you're making a contribution? If an employee feels that he or she is being excluded or being treated differently by his peers, I do believe that it is the employee's responsibility to bring it forward. If you're left off of a distribution list, then you can just go to the person and ask them to include you next time. You don't have to overreact, and you certainly don't have to put the person in a position where they have to try to figure out how to save face. A small act of exclusion really may not warrant a long and deep conversation. Often it's simply enough just to ask for a change in behavior. If the behavior is unintentional, the person will probably stop. However, if it continues, then more serious interventions may be required. Employers do have an obligation to make sure that concerns are fully addressed when an employee feels that he or she is being excluded or treated differently from his or her peers. Left unchecked, these saboteurs can continue to accumulate, and they will impact your productivity. They'll impact your organizational culture and ultimately your ability to attract top talent. Everybody wants to have the best and the brightest working in their organization. So as we close this part of our conversation, I want you to understand that we will never really get to where we need to be with diversity and inclusion efforts in organizations if we're not willing to dig deeper into this topic. So I want you to digest what you have heard and what you have seen today. I want you to think about the commitment that you're willing to make to actually countering micro-inequities in your organization and promoting inclusion within your respective office. I'd like everyone to remember that micro-inequities, they may be real small, but they pose a major issue for businesses today. I do want to thank you for your time, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your conversation today. Thank you. Thank you guys for doing such a great job. I'm definitely going to have to work on my BlackBerry micro-inequity. We all. All right, now comes the important interactive portion of my program today. We know as boys, we always have something to say, so please do not hold back during this portion of our program. Walking the Talk, Breaking Barriers and Building Bridges workshop, presented by Mr. Michael Landmark. He is a lawyer, educator, and law firm trainer who understands the international perspective. Michael has presented on 6 of 7 continents in every one of the 50 United States. Michael graduated from the University of Chicago Law School and practiced 9 years